Simple. We haven't mentioned Blorks yet. Let's move on. Send enough Borks and your Borks to Smorgle ratio will go skyrocketing into the Dunkelsphere!
Users are not allowed to send sexually explicit Gorks. If you receive one of these Gorks, simply notify one of our Gork moderators and they'll review that user's account for possible deletion and or vivification.
You know, a lot of people say, I love Twitter, but every time I sign in, it's just a blank screen. Why is it like that? I don't know how to turn my computer on.
I think we'll leave it at that. I think we kind of got the gist. In terms of the jargon, the complexity, the rubbish that's out there. There's so many many alternative options, and all of them are saying, choose me, choose me, choose me. But I think when it comes to making a strategic decision as an academic, there are core social mediums that you need to be working with. Okay, and that's the kind of LinkedIn, Twitter, blogging. These are the core ways. These have the most users. And I think if you're going to be really kind of smart with your time, you need to be thinking about where have I got the most audience? Where are the most academics present? You know, whether it's academia.edu or ResearchGate. So I think there are strategic decisions to be made. Again, I'm not going to kind of talk about those specific decisions and what to do particularly, but I think it's again it's something for the conference. So if we think about this logical decision that academics do or mostly don't make in terms of engaging with digital media so much, the options and jargon mean that the whole process is too complex. The complexity comes from the need to choose what mediums you're going to do, learn how to use them and execute them, and then nurture them. And there are a lot of process within all of those. Which ones do you choose? For what purpose? And I think that the complexity and the time-consumingness, plus the limited evidence base, is the worst formula for academics to engage. There's no correlation, causation, or is there, right? There's no correlation between whether it works and whether you're more of a successful academic. It's like being in the early adopter stage in product development. You know, will this product develop and kind of skyrocket into the Dunkelsphere? Right? Maybe, I don't know. But as academics, when it comes to the decision of whether I'm going to engage with something that's fairly limited in its evidence base, that's difficult. That's really difficult. So why even bother? And I think we've got into this stage of kind of just looking through the literature and just my experience working with VITA and the research councils, that this whole social media game is a bit novel. It's a bit of a novelty. And there's little evidence that suggests that it kind of works. And according to Weller, Professor Martin Weller, who's kind of there with Professor Andy Meyer in terms of speaking about these digital literacy stuff, that there's no articulated evidence for it. It's all a bit anecdotal. It's kind of worked for me when I tweeted, my post got 4 or 5 more likes, more downloads, more sites, whatever. But there's no systematic evidence that suggests that it works. It's still tentative, even in academia. And this is largely down to the fact that academics and academic institutions revere quality over quantity. So academia in itself, at both an institutional level and an individual level, is very resilient to these changes, unlike media and newspapers perhaps, or music. It's not very elastic to it. Because at the institutional level, the university is such a process of quality assurance in education that it's almost untouchable. And you have these MOOCs, these multiple online courses that are forming, but they don't seem to be massively penetrating the educational market so much. You've got stuff like iTunes U that provide little tasters into what to expect in that particular academic environment, but they're not replacing. And I think this is largely due to the quality assurance, and this is what Weller says as well. But at the individual level, when making those decisions, we all know that the traditional forms, and me and Simon were talking about this, we all know that the traditional forms of academic output in terms of career progress are completely down to good level journals, good submission to journals, and conference attendance. Those are the main things, and we all know that, and these will still remain key. And I think there is a wider debate, whether it evolves over the next 10 years, is whether digital scholarship, digital education, the online education, will replace institutions. And will digital scholarship, having everything online, replace the journal? Well, actually, we are seeing that a lot of journals are now shifting their production online. We've got more e-journals and subscriptions that are online. There's less focus on kind of having the paper version. Everything's a lot more online. We can see that the digital scholarship forces are changing academia, but we're in a weird fuzzy middle. They haven't yet, and I think a lot of people aren't really taking it so seriously. And I don't blame them. Why? Maybe it's just a novelty. I don't know. We'll see. But I think going forward now, in the next kind of 1, 2, 3 years, if you're an individual academic thinking about digital scholarship, I see it a bit more like a bolt-on. Bolt-on in terms of what you're doing now, shifting your production over online, elements of it anyway. It's important that we look at the evidence, and there were probably about 20 big pieces of evidence that I could have put in this presentation. I've chosen to look at blogs. I've chosen to look at Twitter, because they're the two main forms of dissemination online. So there was a study by the World Bank, some senior economists wanted to look at whether, if they blogged about a research paper, it would increase the amounts of downloads and hits on this RePEc, the research papers in economics, which is a database. And what they found was quite interesting. It was a very small study to start with. I'm sorry about the resolution, but what we found is that they looked at the article reviews, and the moment this paper was blogged on from this quite a popular economics blog called Marginal Revolution, it shot up instantly. Quite interesting. This was only a preliminary study, just a bit of fun. Then we looked at another paper. It was blogged on Freakonomics, which is, again, a very, very popular economics blog, and I know that Imco reads it. And instantly, they saw that the views went up. And again, for the next blog, and Chris Blackman, he's a really kind of a serial blogger in the economics world. And again, kind of we saw that the article views went up because of blogs. So that kind of that got them to think about how they expand the study, and what they did was look at this over the kind of 94 papers. Instead of just 3, they looked at it in 94 papers on this database, and they blogged over 6 economics blogs. So these blogs were AidWatch, Chris Blackman, Economics, which is part of the New York Times, Marginal Revolution, Freakonomics, and Paul Krugman's blog. So they're what they constituted as kind of key economics blogs. And their results were interesting, positive and negative. This is a direct extract from their report. It said that blogging about a paper causes a large increase in the number of abstract views and the downloads in the same month. An average impact of an extra 70 to 95 abstract views in the case of AidWatch and Blackman, 135 for economics, 300 for Marginal Revolution, and 450 to 470 for Freakonomics and Krugman. This is interesting. These increases are massive compared to the typical abstract views and downloads these papers normally get. One blog post in Freakonomics is equivalent to 3 years of abstract views, right? However, only a minority of readers clicked through. We estimate 1 to 2% of readers of the more popular blogs clicked on the links to view the paper, not just the abstract, but the paper. And 4% on a blog like Chris Blackman that slightly has a more specialised research-focused readership. And this emphasises, and this really consolidates my thinking about how we see social media as a bit of a superficial exercise that looks like it has a major impact, but when it comes to people reading the paper and potentially citing the paper, the stats don't quite add up.
There's also an access issue here, isn't it? So then you need to make
Yeah,
sure
a lot of
papers
people
can't actually get to it.
Exactly. It's
Mm-hmm.
lack of open access.
I think these papers on this particular research database were open.
Oh, right.
They have to have been.
But people can't be bothered to actually read. No, I
That's-
can understand that.
No, that's it. Yeah, they thought it sounds good, but when they got to the abstract, they thought, nah, not for me.
But we know loads of students take books out of the library, they sit on the side and, you know, it's not until the reminder letter comes saying you need to take it back that even it gets open, you know. I mean,
You think just students do that?
no, I didn't
I do
say
that.
students. I was thinking, but there's this myth that you put it under the pillow and by osmosis the knowledge is transferred across. And I think, you know, whilst you're talking about digital scholarship, there's an element that's about scholarship.
Yeah.
That just because we're talking about a slightly different medium, a lot of the similar facts occur. I think it's purely much more to do with accessibility. You know, but if you spent 3 hours searching for a paper, and you think, yes, I finally found it, you go down and can't celebrate. You've only spent 10 minutes, and at least you've got a hope of them reading the paper before you actually give up and go down the pub.
No, great. But let's see how long we've got. Right, we've got another 5 minutes. So, in terms of kind of, this is particularly around kind of the role of Twitter. These are a little bit more positive, and these coincide with a lot of experiences that I've had with Twitter in terms of getting recognition online. And you know what we can see here is that this paper, in terms of abstract views, this person had kind of a relatively quite big Twitter following. She had, I think it was around 21,000 Twitter following. And she released a paper, and she retweeted once, and she immediately got 700. We can see that at these development times over here, as the paper was tweeted throughout, as she had a news item in kind of a newsletter, a news item in the email bulletin, she saw them go up. But actually, interestingly, we've got this kind of strong correlation between kind of tweeting and a very, very high, strong publication view. Maybe that's because it was first released, so you'd naturally get more views. I don't know, there's a lot of variables to it. But that's just kind of a snapshot into Twitter. Here, another one by Martin Terras from the London School of Economics. And again, we can kind of see this trend of tweeting and increased abstract views. Again, whether these views actually turned into sites, again, it's difficult to know. There's not much research on it. There actually isn't much research on it, which is a huge shame. But it's relatively quite a new phenomenon, so people are kind of still experimenting. But we can see that kind of as tweets progress, views and downloads increase as well. So, in terms of co-authorship, this is slightly related to networks, the importance of these online networks. And out of 2,500 LSE outputs, most of them were output by 1,200 outputs were output by 0 co-authors, so just a single author. And then we look at the impact on citation, and this is interesting because those papers that had 2 authors or 3 authors, but kind of the significant figure here is 2 authors, citations increased. Why is that? Actually, the LSE policy group in their report said we don't really know why this is, but we assume that it's that the more authors, the more contacts, and the larger networks of research publication can be disseminated to, the better. Again, it just symbolises just very weak evidence, but that's all we've got. The evidence really isn't there for social media. And that's a bit of a problem. So when it comes to these worries that academics have, there are a range of different worries that people have in terms of kind of actually engaging with this subject area. The first one being open access and sharing, the intellectual property and theft of ideas. And I'm sure kind of from some conversations that I've had with academics, this seems to be the number one. The fact that their ideas can be stolen, can be plagiarised, it is a bit of a worry. But as we kind of go into this open access type of situation, then this is going to be of an increasing concern for those who are being pushed towards open access. By shouting louder about your work, will this increase the level of negative criticism? Maybe. Nature, again, sorry about the resolution, but we're not going to kind of go into depth about it. But Nature released a 2011 publication called Trial by Twitter. And one of their papers was tweeted, retweeted to 4,000 followers. Those followers were academics, very much interested in what they had to say. However, what happened was, by increasing that peer network, increased concerns around their methodology happened. So what happened is, one expert saw this particular publication and they found an absolute fundamental flaw in the methodology. What happened with that particular paper is that it was taken out of Nature, and they had to rethink about their whole paper. And I think that it's important to address these kind of criticisms. Time and patience, as we mentioned before, in light of a very hard workload. But I think this is the key one. Choosing it over traditional academic forms. And I think when it comes to the day-to-day operations of an academic, if it's between blogging about your particular research or working on your particular abstract or introduction of a paper that you're about to submit, which one are you going to choose? The old notion of academic progression is the key thing. That most social media activity isn't so much linked with academic progression. Is it really recognised? And I think it situates this kind of wider debate of whether digital scholarship represents proper scholarship, and that's the key question that Martin Weller poses, and that's something that we're kind of grappling with. And by having a digital scholarship themed research conference, does that instill some trust in the academic community, as in, is this really being taken seriously? And I think firstly we need the evidence that suggests it does, which is lacking, and we need the backing of senior management, and I think that's the key question here. So thank you for listening. So I think
questions.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions?
I think that was very interesting. Thank you for that.
Could you introduce yourself, actually?
Yes, it's Professor Rowan Carlson from Law. I'm Director of Research in ALS.
Senior Manager, Mike.
People who we need to.
But I found that very interesting. I found it particularly interesting looking at the graphs that you put up on the tweets and the effects of those tweets. That is very interesting. One of the things that I suppose academics have not really followed as much, perhaps as they should, is what's happening in the creative spheres. For example, with writers of fiction on Amazon. I mean, people like Mark Coker at Smashwords. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this type of subject area, but have been pioneering the use of social media in terms of being able to disseminate the idea of the book. And in fact, when you publish on a site like Smashwords, which effectively makes available an ebook to a very wide audience, and then you go on to publish, say, on Kindle Direct, or CreateSpace, which is the, if you like, the paperback version of the ebook. One of the things that they ask you to do is to disable protection of copyright in terms of digital rights management. And what they found is that when you do that, the dissemination, the spread of dissemination just escalates. So I think as academics, and this is one of the things that we're grappling with at the moment, this idea of open access. Academics traditionally, I think, are very protective about the idea of releasing a book to a readership, and they want to ensure as wide as dissemination as possible, but protect the copyright or protect the ideas behind that book. But what we're seeing is that actually one can release digital rights without fear. And this is a really interesting idea, and it's something that I think we should really explore. The other thing I think is, as research councils move towards the next breath, I think you picked on it, you mentioned it a little earlier, this idea of research environment and impact. I mean, perhaps one thing that we can learn from social media is the impact of social media in terms of impact. You know, how does it achieve wider dissemination? And perhaps that's another area that we should be looking at, because there is the criticism that social media for academics perhaps is a slightly shallow beast, but that perhaps we're looking at it in terms of the wrong way. We're looking at the telescope the other way around. In fact, what we should be thinking about social media is not so much in terms of trying to achieve depth and scholarship, but trying to ensure that that scholarship is disseminated as widely as possible. And then the idea that once you disseminate, how does it get picked up? Just throwing those ideas out, you know.
I think
it's very interesting, really interesting. It would be great to see that take off.
Well, hopefully, you know, I think we've got back into the whole conference, but we just need to work to detail that.
that was definitely a theme that we proposed, talking about how social media will contribute to pathways to impact. I definitely think it's worth it.
The whole measurement thing, I mean, it's only the ref that really protects the traditional scholarship thing in relation to academic sort of progression and careers. If you get rid of that, you know, it is he who shouts, or he or she who shouts loudest. If you go in any other sphere of life, well, what's Mike talking about here? He's talking about celebrity. And in my view, I mean, if you get rid of that codified regulatory, you know, the papers, you know, it will be those that shout loudest. And it's interesting about the impact agenda, because the measurable is what's going to get measured. Therefore, your numbers of tweets, the whole gamification side of things. You know, who among us here, for promotion purposes, has put in things like Google sites and all the rest of it? You know, these things that get counted, or things that can be carried, will be measured. So impact for Ref 2020 is all going to be about this stuff. And you know, it may not reflect the reality of